Millionaire CEO found a little girl in the cold. What he did changed her life forever. It was one of those rare, bitter nights in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the cold sank deep and the streets stood empty under a thin sheet of snow. Jason Marlowe, a wealthy and reclusive CEO known across Arizona for his renewable energy ventures, sat in the back of his sleek black Tesla, the heated seats doing little to thaw the chill inside his chest. As the car coasted slowly through Beaver Street, Jason gazed out the window absent-mindedly until a flicker of movement beneath a broken street lamp caught his eye. A small girl, barefoot, shivering, her arms wrapped around her knees, sat curled on a weathered bench near a closed bus shelter. She wore a soaked hoodie, her skin pale and raw from exposure. Jason leaned forward and spoke firmly. "Stop the car." His driver, Cole, glanced back in confusion. "Sir, it's late. Want me to loop around?" Jason had already opened the door and stepped out into the frost-bitten wind. "The danger," he muttered without looking back, "is leaving her there." Snow crunched under his expensive shoes as he walked toward the bench. The girl didn't move. She didn't even flinch when he crouched beside her. "Hey there," he said softly, voice calm but heavy with concern. She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. Her own were wide, red-rimmed and tired far beyond her years. "You cold?" he asked. She gave a slow, tiny nod. Without another word, he slipped off his heavy coat and wrapped it gently around her. The fabric nearly swallowed her whole, but she didn't resist. "Do you have a name?" he tried. Silence. "Do you have somewhere to go?" After a pause, she whispered, "I don't have one." Her voice barely broke the air. Jason's throat tightened. He sat beside her, not caring that snow soaked through his tailored suit. "I don't know what you've been through," he said quietly, "and you don't have to tell me now, but I'm not leaving you here." He reached out a gloved hand. She hesitated, her lip quivering, but then she placed her freezing hand in his. Gently, he lifted her off the bench. Her knees buckled slightly, so he picked her up, holding her against his chest. Her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, as if clinging to the last warmth in the world. As they approached the car, Cole stepped out, eyes wide. Jason didn't say a word as he slid into the back seat, still holding her. "Where to, sir?" Cole asked. Jason looked down at the girl, then stared through the frosted window. "Home," he answered. The car pulled away, tires whispering over fresh snow. The little girl rested her head against Jason's chest, eyes closed. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, she was warm, safe, wanted. Jason Marlowe stepped through the glass doors of his Prescott Valley estate just past midnight, cradling the small, sleeping girl in his arms. The warmth of the foyer greeted them, contrasting sharply with the biting cold they'd left behind. His housekeeper, Rosa, blinked in confusion from the hallway, still in her robe. "Sir?" she asked cautiously. Jason raised a hand gently, his voice quiet. "Prepare the guest room and warm some soup." Rosa had worked for him 10 years and had never seen anyone else walk through that front door, let alone a child. Jason walked up the spiral staircase slowly, careful not to wake the girl. He pushed open the door to the rarely used guest suite, immaculate, untouched, emotionless. As he laid her down on the bed, she stirred, her eyes fluttering open with a flicker of fear. "You're safe," he whispered. "Just rest." But she sat up instead, pulled the coat tighter around herself, and slid off the bed to the carpeted corner. There, she curled up again, just like she had on that bench. Jason didn't stop her. He nodded to Rosa, who placed a bowl of warm chicken soup on the nearby table, then quietly stepped away. The child didn't speak. She ate in small, rushed bites as if someone might take it away at any second. Jason sat in the nearby chair, watching, not judging, just observing. He didn't know what to say. He only knew she shouldn't be alone. In the morning, he didn't go to work. For the first time in years, he called off his meetings. Instead, he found himself pacing outside the guest room door, waiting for the sound of her stirring. When Rosa informed him she was awake but hadn't touched the breakfast tray, he entered with soft steps. "I made you something," he said awkwardly, holding out a children's book he found buried in a storage box. "The Velveteen Rabbit." She didn't reply, but when he sat on the edge of the carpet and opened it, she crawled closer, just close enough to listen. He read, badly. He stumbled through voices and stuttered at long words, and somewhere around page 6, he caught the tiniest smile on her face. That evening, she wandered into his study while he was reviewing a construction blueprint. She had found a box of crayons and a stack of old printer paper. Without asking, she started drawing. When he turned around, she had scribbled suns, stick figures, and a big messy house labeled "Family." She taped it to the wall beside his awards. "That's us," she mumbled, eyes still on her drawing. Jason didn't correct her. The next day, he caught her giggling, actually giggling, at one of his failed attempts to make scrambled eggs. She stood on a step stool beside him, tiny arms reaching for a spatula. "You're not very good at this, Mr. Fancy Pants," she said, deadpan. Jason laughed, a sound that startled even him. It had been years. The name stuck. She called him that every time he wore a blazer, which was always. Slowly, the house changed. It became louder, warmer. She left crayon marks on his office desk. She hid her stuffed toy under his pillows. She asked questions at dinner and fell asleep during movies she insisted they watch. Jason started learning her rhythms, the way she pulled her sleeves when nervous, how she avoided windows during thunderstorms, the way she always saved the last bite of food as if planning for later. One night, while reading another bedtime story, she reached out and touched his hand. "Do you live here alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Until you came along." She looked at him for a long second. "That's sad," she said honestly, "but not anymore." And then just before drifting off, she giggled again. Softer this time, real. It was the first sound of joy his home had heard in over a decade. And Jason, watching her from the doorway, felt something shift in his chest. Not fast, but gently, like the slow thaw of snow under desert sun. Jason sat at the edge of his leather armchair late one evening, the soft hum of the fireplace flickering beside him as he stared at the small piece of paper in his hand, a drawing done in crayon, clearly by a child. In big lopsided letters, it read, "You make me feel safe." The stick figure beside the words wore a crooked suit and tie. Jason's name, spelled Jason, was scrawled underneath. He smiled, but it faded quickly. The joy of hearing her giggle, of feeling her presence in his home, couldn't fully mask the questions that tugged at him daily. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why had no one come looking? He couldn't live with not knowing. Quietly, he made a few calls. Old contacts from his early legal team, discreet and thorough. Within 48 hours, 2 private investigators were combing through public shelter records, state databases, and missing persons files. Jason told no one, not even Rosa. He didn't want to scare the girl, or worse, risk losing her if the wrong person came forward. Days passed with no updates. Meanwhile, Emily, yes, she'd finally told him her name, began to open up more. She sang softly in the hallways, renamed every plant in the house, and asked if she could draw a welcome mat for her room. She didn't seem worried about the world outside, but Jason couldn't rest until he knew what that world had done to her. When the report arrived, it came in a sealed envelope marked confidential. Jason sat at his desk, heart tight, and opened it. Line by line, truth unfolded. Emily had been placed in a shelter in Phoenix 8 months ago. Her mother had dropped her off, claiming it was temporary, but she never returned. Records showed no follow-up visits, no calls, no inquiries. After 6 weeks, the system labeled Emily as unclaimed. No relatives, no foster placement, no one. Jason leaned back, hand pressed to his face, unable to breathe for a moment. She was abandoned, left to wait, alone, day after day, until the waiting stopped and she walked away. That's when she must have ended up in Flagstaff, drifting without a destination. He looked at her drawing again. "You make me feel safe." His chest tightened. What kind of world does that to a child? What kind of system files them under unclaimed property, like a forgotten suitcase at the airport? Later that night, as he passed the laundry room, he paused. There, in a basket beside his dry-cleaned shirts, were her socks, tiny, faded, polka-dotted, barely held together by the thread. He picked one up, ran it between his fingers. Something so small shouldn't feel that heavy. That night, as he tucked Emily into bed, she asked, "Am I staying here forever?" Jason froze. She stared at him, not with fear, but hope. Desperate, delicate hope. He crouched beside her, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you want to?" She nodded once. "Then yes," he whispered, "if I have anything to say about it, forever." When she fell asleep, he sat in the hallway, back against the wall, the door still slightly ajar. He didn't move for an hour. His mind didn't race with meetings or deadlines or money. Just one truth echoed again and again. He wasn't her father, not by blood, not yet by law. But when she handed him that drawing, when she trusted him with her smile, when she called his home her room, he knew. He wanted to be her family. Jason knew what he had to do the moment he walked out of Emily's room that night. The warmth of her trust wrapped around him tighter than any responsibility ever had. But the law didn't care about trust. It cared about documentation, legality, systems, and signatures. He contacted his attorney the next morning and began the process. Guardianship, custody, anything that would make her presence in his life permanent. But it wasn't simple. The state didn't welcome the request. "We can't just hand over a child to a private citizen, regardless of income," one caseworker warned. "We have procedures. There are protocols. She needs to be evaluated, placed, reviewed." Jason stayed composed. "She's not a file. She's a child." The caseworker's voice was firm. "And the system exists to protect children from people who think their money can fix everything." Jason didn't argue that day. He didn't pull strings or write checks. He started building something better. Proof. Not of wealth, but of love. For weeks, he gathered everything that mattered. Blurry photos Emily had taken of their pancake breakfasts, her drawings of their family, audio clips of her calling him Mr. Fancy Pants, then later, Daddy, in a sleepy whisper. He asked Rosa to write a letter about the change she'd seen in both of them. He even recorded one of their bedtime reading sessions, the softest, most natural part of his days. By the time they stood in front of the judge, he wasn't carrying a legal brief. He was carrying a memory box. In the courtroom, Jason stood tall but nervous, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Across from him sat a state-appointed representative, flipping through printed documents, citing code numbers and policy language. Jason waited patiently, and then, when the moment came, he walked to the front and gently placed the memory box on the judge's desk. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "I'm not here to buy anything. I'm not here to bend the law. I'm here because a 6-year-old girl changed my life without asking for a thing." The courtroom was quiet. He opened the box, lifted out a drawing of a stick figure in a tie, and placed it before the judge. "This is the first time she called me Dad." Then he played a short recording. Emily's voice, giggling as she mispronounced the word asparagus during dinner. It echoed softly through the room. Jason continued, voice low but steady. "She doesn't need another file number. She needs continuity, stability, someone who knows her bedtime fears, her favorite color, the name of the bunny she lost last year." The judge studied him. No emotion, no nod, just silence. "I'm not offering money," Jason added. "I'm offering a life, one she's already given me back 10 times over." His hands stayed at his sides, heart pounding harder than it ever had in any business meeting, deal, or boardroom battle. For the first time, Jason wasn't fighting for profit. He was fighting for love. The judge sat still for a long moment, eyes lingering on the crayon drawing in front of him. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Mr. Marlowe," he said, "we don't usually approve private adoptions this quickly, but sometimes," he looked down at the box, then at Jason, "sometimes the law has to follow the heart." A beat of silence passed. "Your adoption is approved." Jason didn't move at first. It was Rosa in the back row who gasped softly. Then Jason closed his eyes for a second, breathing in the weight of what had just happened. Outside the courtroom, Emily was waiting with a stuffed animal under her arm, drawing in a sketch pad. When Jason walked out, she looked up. "Did they say yes?" she asked. He knelt down, eye level with her, and smiled. "They did." She jumped into his arms, wrapping her tiny frame around his neck, whispering, "You're really my dad now." And Jason, with eyes misted but voice clear, whispered back, "I always was." Spring came early in Arizona that year. The snow had melted from the Prescott Hills, and with it, the cold walls of Jason Marlowe's once sterile home seemed to dissolve too. Where framed patents and corporate plaques once adorned his office, there were now uneven rows of colorful finger paintings, mostly suns, hearts, and stick figures holding hands. One particularly bold piece, painted in glitter glue, was titled Daddy's Rocket House, and took up half the wall behind his desk. His personal assistant raised an eyebrow the first time she saw it, but Jason only smiled. The transformation hadn't stopped at the walls. There were toys everywhere. Stuffed animals nestled in leather chairs, Lego castles on the floor beside the fireplace, dolls tucked into throw blankets. His once pristine marble floors now bore a trail of tiny socks and cookie crumbs. The hallway echoed not with the silence of wealth, but with laughter. High-pitched, spontaneous, contagious laughter that came from the girl who had become the soul of his home. Emily had claimed the space not out of rebellion, but with the quiet confidence of a child who finally knew she belonged. And Jason? He welcomed it all. His staff whispered about the changes behind his back. "He's softer now," one security guard murmured. "He stopped working weekends," said his project manager. "He cancelled a board meeting for a school play." And it was true. The man who once measured success in percentages and projections now marked time in bedtime stories and coloring book pages. His mornings started with tiny footsteps, running down the stairs, arms flung around his waist before coffee. His Sundays were no longer spent reviewing expansion reports, but making pancakes shaped like unicorns and letting Emily decide which food coloring to use. "Pink again?" he'd ask, pretending to sigh. "Pink again," she'd reply with a grin. He no longer wore suits around the house. Sometimes he wore mismatched socks she picked out. Other times, a glittery sticker would remain on his shirt collar throughout his video calls. When investors asked questions, he simply said, "My daughter's taste in fashion is fearless." Emily brought life into every corner of his home. She turned the quiet guest room into a creative jungle of hanging paper crafts, sticker charts, and a nightlight shaped like a baby cactus. In the kitchen, she taped up a weekly pancake scoreboard, tracking which animal shapes Daddy was best at. Apparently, his butterflies needed work. Jason had even bought a small upright piano, just so Emily could learn. Most afternoons, the house filled with clumsy but determined notes of "Twinkle, twinkle," often interrupted by her giggles when she hit the wrong key. The housekeeper Rosa, once hesitant, now kept a drawer full of stickers and secretly saved all of Emily's mail, scribbled letters left in her apron pocket. Emily made everyone family. Even the dogs from next door had learned to show up at their gate for cookies and attention. The house was no longer Jason's sanctuary of silence. It was their canvas of chaos. But it was beautiful. One evening, Jason stood in his office, looking at the wall, once lined with achievement awards. He didn't miss them. He didn't need them. Emily walked in, wearing a blanket like a cape, and asked, "Want to be the prince or the dragon?" He put on a gold plastic crown without hesitation. "I'm the dragon today." She squealed and ran off, and he followed her through the hall with roaring sounds that had Rosa laughing from the kitchen. He wasn't just a father now. He wasn't just a CEO. For the first time in his life, Jason was something else entirely. He was whole. He was at peace. And in a house once built for power, he had found something far greater: happiness. A year had passed, not just in numbers or seasons, but in transformation. Quiet, profound, and unshakable. On the first anniversary of the night, everything changed. Jason didn't go to the office, he didn't schedule calls or check emails. Instead, he drove with Emily through the winding back roads of Flagstaff, her backpack beside her, filled with something she wouldn't let him peek at. The air was cool and crisp, the sky clear with the golden light of early spring. Emily hummed softly to herself as she stared out the window, feet swinging in rhythm. When they reached the corner of Beaver Street, Jason pulled over without needing directions. The same bus stop bench stood quietly beneath the old street lamp, now fixed but still casting its soft amber glow. Time had moved on, but the memory of that night stayed untouched in Jason's mind. The silence, the snow, her tiny, freezing frame curled on that cold wooden bench. Now she was walking beside him, hand in his, coat zipped up, cheeks rosy, not from cold, but from health, from warmth, from love. As they reached the bench, Emily let go of his hand and pulled the small gift box from her backpack. She set it gently on the seat, almost ceremonially. Jason watched in silence. The box was plain, wrapped in brown paper and tied with red yarn. She opened it carefully and placed inside a soft blue scarf, one she had picked out herself from the store just a week earlier. A granola bar with chocolate chips, and a neatly folded note written in her careful handwriting. Then she closed the lid and stepped back. Jason sat down slowly, letting the quiet settle. Emily joined him. The wind moved softly through the pine trees nearby, brushing against their jackets, but never cutting through. "You want to read it to me?" Jason asked, nodding to the box. She shook her head gently. "It's not for us," she said. "It's for someone who might be like I was." Her voice was calm, thoughtful, far older than her years. "If they're scared or cold, they might find it." Jason blinked slowly, trying to push away the sting forming behind his eyes. "Do you remember that night?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Some parts, mostly how I felt." "How did you feel?" "Invisible," she answered, then added, "but only for a little while." Jason looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the small broken child from a year ago, but someone standing tall in her own quiet courage. "You changed my life, Emily," he said, his voice raw but steady. She turned toward him, her hand slipping into his, eyes soft with the kind of love that can't be taught, only felt. "You changed mine first, Daddy," she whispered. They sat together in silence for a few minutes more, watching the light shift across the street. Cars passed, people walked by, but no one stopped. Still, Emily leaned into his side, head resting against his shoulder, and Jason wrapped his arm around her like a shield, not from the world, but from ever being alone in it again. The box remained on the bench, quiet and waiting. Somewhere, someday, someone else might find it, and maybe it would make them believe, just like Emily had once learned to believe again, that kindness still existed, that hope could still arrive in the form of a stranger offering a coat, that broken things could be mended, that forever wasn't a myth. As Jason kissed the top of her head and breathed in the cool air, he didn't feel like a CEO or a savior or a man who had done something noble. He just felt complete. Two souls who had once wandered alone had found something greater than success, comfort, or even safety. They had found each other, and at that quiet bench under a dim Arizona sky, their story had come full circle, not with an ending, but a beginning that would last forever.